Hello and welcome to Hyper Live. And today our very special guest, Dr. Dani Chesson. Welcome, and co-host as usual, Daniel Walters. So our topic for today is don't outsource your intuition. And we're going to be talking about human-centered design with AI and the benefits, pitfalls, and ethical implications. So, well, first, I'd love to pass over to you, Dani, and maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Sure. This is the part I hate the most. So I'm Dani Chesson. I'm the founder and director of the Design Thinker Institute. In terms of background, I started out my career as a graphic designer, spent about 13 years of my life in corporate, an accidental corporate person. And in that work, I led large-scale transformations. I worked in banking, and then I got very frustrated with the lack or the slow pace of change and decided I was going to go find better ways to do that, which is where I went down the PhD path and figured out some stuff. And that's what I do now is I use what I learned in research to help organizations do some cool stuff.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to hearing more. So pass over to you, Daniel, and then we'll get into the topic.
Yeah, I was going to say, for someone who hates it, Dr. Dani, I wish I could do it as well, but I'll give it a crack. So hi, everyone. It's Daniel Walters, founder of Great CTO, and I also work on the consulting side with the Hyper team. So looking forward to our chat today.
Yeah, so maybe do you want to just tell us a little bit about your journey with design thinking, behavioral science, and then we can see if we can sort of understand that connection with AI and explore that topic a little bit more.
So the way that I like to talk about these two topics is, if you think about design work and particularly design thinking, it helps us understand needs, wants, and pain points, which are the source of problems that we face, right? So every problem comes back to a need or want is not being met, which is the pain point, and the work of design is to create that, to create or alleviate the pain point or provide the need. But what happens is, as we are creating that, where behavioral science comes in is that we have to remember that humans don't always behave the way that we expect them to. So as we're creating the solutions, we need to actually think about, what do we expect humans to do here? And is that how they're going to behave? Or how do we help create a solution that's what I call, the term I like to use is brain friendly. So how do we create solutions that are brain friendly so that it makes it easier for people to use the things that they want us to give them? So that
makes a whole lot of sense. And so, yeah, tell us a little bit more from a behavioral science, like the bias perspective, like that. What does that sort of mean in this context?
So the human brain is very biased, and I feel like we use that term a lot, and we tend to, there's this misconception that because we're biased, like it is a bad thing. Our biases are actually a very good thing. We actually would not survive as a species if it wasn't for our biases, right? So we have to understand, why do we have biases? And the why there is that our brains have a big job to do. It has to do about 1 million things to keep us alive. Then it has to show up at work and perform. And then it's got to think about, what am I going to make for dinner? What do the kids need? Does the laundry do? So all of this is all of the things that is happening in your brain. And don't forget, while it's doing all of that, it's also got to make sure that it reminds you to breathe. Or it does the things that keeps you breathing, right? So the way that the brain handles this is that it has created a whole network of shortcuts. And you can think about these shortcuts as like if-then statements. And what these if-then statements allow us to do is it allows us to automate a lot of what we do, which is a really good thing, because if we didn't, we would probably be exhausted by the time we got out of bed in the morning. But what these shortcuts also do is it creates biases, because our brains are working at a very, very fast pace, making really, really quick decisions. And sometimes those quick decisions are made, they cause errors in judgment, if you will, right? Because we're making very, very quick decisions and we're not considering all the details and the context.
So is it kind of like, it's almost like pattern recognition, and like sometimes we don't quite match the pattern, but matching the patterns quickly is it's a survival thing, I guess, for an evolutionary trait, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you think about it, our ancestors who were out in the savannah, if they saw our brains won't distinguish between a lion and a cheetah. It's just going to go, that is a big cat and I know it's going to kill me, so I'm going to run. And in that context, it's saving our lives. But then if you think about in our modern world, we don't face those. So that same thing that saved us in this situation is now causing us to make errors in judgment.
Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. And so how do you use that in design? Like, can you use that to help aid design, or how does that work?
So in design work, often where I use behavioral sciences in thinking about how I ask questions, how I present ideas, because again, our brains are trying to move very quickly, right? So framing is everything. The way that, so whatever information you lead with, the brain will kind of hold on to that and it'll become the anchor that it bases everything else on. So thinking about what is the thing I'm going to lead with? What is the number I'm going to start with? So these kinds of things, this is where behavioral science could really help us, because we can think about these concepts in thinking about how do we frame our questions? How do we frame our questions so they're not leading? How do we frame our questions so that we haven't primed people to respond in a certain way? So that is one way that we can use behavioral science.
Yeah, cool. And what's the connection there in terms of how can our brains, how can we help our brains make better relationships with AI in that context?
So to be very transparent, I have not figured this out. I don't know that anybody has, but if they have, please reach out. But this is something that I am exploring based on my understanding of how the human brain works, and then also just lots of playing around on all the AI tools. So I'm just figuring this out, right? So one of the challenges with AI, and if you think about how AI is being trained, like I know that when we engage with AI, it gives off this impression like you're talking to a person. But fundamentally, most of the AI that we're using today, it's a large collection of information that flawed humans have fed in, and it's learned from our flawed logic. So one thing we have to think about is, well, first we have to remember that. And then the second thing we have to remember is that now we are using our very biased brains to engage with something that has also been created with biases.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting, isn't it? So training on human generated data, which has all of the human bias, creates AIs, or LLMs, whatever form of AI, that inherently has that human bias in it as well. I mean, is it worse than human bias, or is it kind of like the same, or
Well, I feel like it's worse because fundamentally we know that humans are fallible. Like we know that. We know humans are flawed. So whether we verbalize it or we're conscious about it, we know that humans make mistakes. It's an accepted fact. But when it comes to technology, we tend to have more trust in it. Like it's weird. We tend to believe that technology is more accurate than humans. And I think to some degree it has been, right? Like I don't know of a situation where like a calculator was wrong. So I've
seen it, but I take your point. It's most of the time it's seen as deterministic and therefore trustworthy, and I'm seeing a lot of these interactions with people using it and then You know, they get a hallucination that's egregious for the first time, and they're like genuinely surprised because, as you're saying, there's so much trust invested into it that they're assuming it's tech. Therefore, yeah. So that's really interesting.
And I think this is also where there's all this talk about AI is going to replace all of these things, which, yeah, I mean, it probably will replace a lot of things. But to fundamentally use AI, you have to have some knowledge about the thing that you're using AI with. Because otherwise, lots of times we pick up on things that AI says that we're like, hang on, that's not right. But the only reason that we can do that is because we know that topic. And I can give you an example. I lecture at university, and I once had a student submit a paper. And as I was grading it, I came across this new citation, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. That's not one I'm familiar with. Let me go look that up. And guess what?
Made it up.
So one, if you're a student watching this, make sure that I know that references have gotten better with AI. This was like in the very, very early days, but make sure you check your references. But I wouldn't have known, like the only thing that triggered me to go actually check that reference is because I know this is a topic that I have some expertise in, and I know who should have been cited and they weren't. It's just an example, but you can see how this applies to lots of other things, right?
We see examples of this in the AI assisted software development. So one of the things you learn is what is likely to be in the training corpus, and therefore what could you have more confidence that it might produce a more reliable result, and then what things may be missing from the training corpus, in which case you will need to, put special attention into providing the relevant context. So that's an example from that area. I'm sure there's many more across all the fields that AI touches.
And so, I know you're experimenting with these tools just as we are, but how can you use AI to design better products and services? What are the things that you're sort of learning as you experiment at the moment?
So I'll kind of call out a few things that we need to be mindful of. So one of them is confirmation bias. I don't know if you've had this experience, and I'm pretty sure you have, where you say something, you type something in or you try to correct AI and it'll say, you're absolutely right, Dani.
The sycophantic sort of nature of the responses, right?
And if you really want to play around with this, say something to it that you know is wrong, and it will say that you're right.
Yeah.
So this is some of the ways that I'm playing around with this. So one of the things, so we have to be mindful that AI will always confirm our biases. Whatever we believe, whatever I believe, I can ask AI of it, and it will confirm for me that what I'm thinking, feeling, doing is right, which has all kinds of dangerousness to it in so many different applications. So I think when we're thinking about designing, when we're thinking about creating solutions, one of them is making sure that we are aware that this tool will confirm our biases. It will confirm what we already believe. So the ways around that, some of the things that I have been playing around with is, when I'm thinking about how do I use AI to create a solution, I ask it to assume certain personas. So I will say, no, imagine you are the head of risk and compliance at the world's biggest bank. Review this idea proposal and give me your feedback. And then, so I'll do that. And then I will ask it to assume the persona of an attorney that specializes in whatever the thing is, because that way you could start to see, this is still not foolproof, but hopefully you're getting this idea about how it's not just about asking it a question and taking what you get back and going, oh, here you go, here's the solution, but it's actually thinking about how might I get it to give me different responses that then I, as the human, need to evaluate based on my understanding of what would a risk person say, what would a lawyer say.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great technique, actually, and we use it. We've been experimenting the same way with, might be accelerating, making sense of requirements for a team, through a discovery validation process, or it might be even as you're engineering, the roles can be as an architect who is an expert in X particular architectural style, or as an expert programmer, or sometimes as a junior programmer to understand, whether they can, whether this implementation makes sense. But it does work quite well, doesn't it?
It's a great point you make, though, that you're doing that not just for the benefit of the model and where it draws its information from, but you're doing it for your benefit and how you consume the information, which I don't think is something that I've thought about before. So yeah, I really like that.
So you've talked about this design AI cognition triangle. So what is that, and where do these ideas intersect?
So I think it comes from this idea that, we've accepted, or I've accepted, that design is an important element of how we solve problems in the 21st century. And we are now starting to think about, well, how does AI help us solve problems in the 21st century? So if you think about design is about understanding needs, wants, and pain points, and then you think about AI is going to somehow help us do this better. And then the third part of that triangle is behavioral science, or understanding how the human brain works. And the reason that I say we have to play around with all of these three things is because fundamentally we want, one, we have to remember how humans actually behave, because what AI thinks we do and what we actually do are going to be different. So there is a lot of room for error if we don't do that. And I think the role of design work is to play in that, or to be the conduit or the liaison, if you will, between the human brain and AI. So I think designers going forward need to know enough about AI and be comfortable with AI, but they also need to know enough about behavioral science and how the human brain works to go, are we actually creating things that humans are going to use that are useful to humans? So this is how I see these three things working. But I think also understanding how the human brain works is what is actually going to help us create better AI as well.
And so, it's, when you think, I guess, in terms of products, like some products, it's very useful to get the kind of the average design back, if you like, from an LLM, because it's maybe lower value and executing it quickly is where the value is. But then other things are, they differentiate, it's the difference between success or failure for an organization. So how do we, are there any kind of ways to, use that sort of triangle to tune the way we think about that, from the value of the design in the context of the work we're doing?
So I think this is being very mindful about where are we using. So when we approach creating something, we need to really think about where does it make sense to use AI and where does it not, or where might it be dangerous to use AI. So one of the things that we do in design work is we do discovery work, which requires us to go out, meet with humans, understand, have the conversations, and then we bring that back and we do some stuff with it to get, to frame up the problem and think about what is a good solution for this. So one of the things that I see happening is where AI could help is it could take all that information that we collect and help us process that information a lot faster. So I ran a micro experiment on this. I've shared quite a bit about myself with ChatGPT. And I asked, and I did this as if I were doing research for a design piece, right? And I asked ChatGPT, based on everything you know about me, create a profile, create a persona of me. Now I know this is not, personas are made up of multiple people, but so I did use different language, but the idea, the concept works. And it was interesting what it came back with, some of the things that it came back with. So I'll share one example. It actually created an image of me and it gave me glasses. And I asked it, oh, this is interesting. Why did you give my profile glasses? And it talked about, well, you seem like a person with substance. You seem very intelligent. So I gave you glasses. Now, in real life, I have 20/20 vision thanks to LASIK. So this is an interesting thing, right? So are we now saying that everybody that wears glasses are intelligent and of substance, and people that don't are the opposite of that? Do you see how these things are coming to play? This isn't to say that we don't use it. This is just to say that we have to be mindful of. So I was already preempting it's going to come up and give me some stereotypical things that it's going to assume about but that's the whole point. So a better way that we could use it is to maybe say, now I've given you all this data, give me the key themes. And then the human goes in and goes, okay, what do these things mean? How do I give this label? Because we have context.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what about exploring, sometimes you can use AI to come up with outrageous kind of ideas, or just explore crazy combinations of things. Can you see some value in that?
Yeah. So there are some places that humans sometimes struggle with, and one of the places is ideation, right? So one of the things that we humans love to do is we like to ideate and judge our ideas at the same time. Right? Which is why we have an idea, and before it comes out of our mouth, we've already decided it's a bad idea. AI doesn't have this filter. It has no need to judge itself, apparently. So it is a really good tool to say, here is a problem. Give me the wildest, boldest, craziest ideas. And what that does is, one, it gives you a list of things to go through. And some of them are actually like, this is actually not bad. But then it gets your brain to go, oh, maybe not this, but maybe this. Like, it just helps you to see some wild ideas, see what an actual wild idea is, and then maybe help you come up with some more reasonable ideas. So that's another way. The other way that I use it is in prototyping. So another thing that we don't tend to be naturally good at is figuring out, like, what are some clever ways we could prototype and test ideas. Something I've discovered, I was playing around with a thing I want to create, and AI was able to pretty quickly code that for me. Now, it's not what I would put out into the world because it looked terrible and it didn't quite get what I was trying to do, but it gave me enough of a thing that I could go to people and go, forget what it looks like, but can you test this for me and tell me, does this meet your need?
Yeah, this has been a theme that's come up a little bit in previous episodes, actually. And, the fidelity is important because you don't want people to assume that it's already working in production quality. But just the acceleration of being able to try many ideas in the same space that it would take previously, and validate through that through feedback is pretty powerful, isn't it?
I like your earlier suggestion too of asking it for those wild ideas, and you can also adjust the temperature of the model as well, which is almost like getting it drunk or something. You can get some really wild ideas. But it's like
this is where I want you to hallucinate, ChatGPT.
That's right. But I mean, that's one of the things, like, whenever I've been involved in the design and discovery side of things, those moments when you can really have some outlandish ideas with your collaborators, are some of the best, and sometimes lead to those real sort of aha moments. But you don't always have those collaborators available until now with the models. So yeah, it's such a great point.
Yeah, and so I mean, overall, do you see, like, what do you think are the biggest impacts in your field from an AI perspective? Where do you think it'll go in terms of trends that you see now being extended?
Well, I think the adoption of AI, it's going to be fast and slow. Like, I don't have this vision of like, and I know there's been predictions of like, I don't know, 50% of people are going to be out of work. And I don't know that things are going to move that fast, because I think the idea that AI could do all of this for us is amazing. And I think if you think about it from a concept perspective, everything that's being said is true. However, from an execution perspective, and you guys would know this having worked in large organizations, this is where we're going to struggle to collectively execute on all the amazing things that AI is going to do. And I think that is going to take a longer than we think.
Yeah.
So I think for the I don't know the time length, because AI changes like every day.
Yeah.
Every day I wake up with something else.
Yeah.
But I think it needs to become more of a relationship. Like, there's a lot of there's a lot of talk about, let's just get AI to replace this. Or I've been a part of a couple of conversations where, executives have said, well, we don't really need to worry about things like employee experience anymore because AI will replace that. Okay. And it needs to become more about, how do we use AI so that we could actually elevate the things that people need to be doing, or the things that humans, like, how do we use AI so that humans are actually adding value, right? Because at the end of the day, humans, we want to go to work, we want to be useful, we want to do good in the world.
Yeah.
But for most of us, we're, admin.
Yeah, that's right. I think there's a huge opportunity there, isn't there? Just reducing toil and lower value work to free humans up to do it's the stuff we want to protect, right? Using our brains to innovate.
Something else. Yeah. And something else I've been thinking about is, like, at the moment, I've been following some of the statistics, the data shifts in terms of, like, there are going to be a lot more people leaving organizations because of retirement age. We all know the baby boomers are a massive generation, and all the generations before that have not been. So the overall view or trend is more people are going to end up leaving the workforce than coming in. And I think this is a really good opportunity to go, okay, if that is the case, then do we rethink, then does AI pick up that lag that's left? And so that way, but this needs some thought, because that means your entry-level worker now needs different skill set, because they'll have AI doing the note-taking, like the grad work that organizations usually have as entry-level work. Now that's going to be done by AI. So what does a grad need to come into an organization being able to do? And then what does that mean for what we're teaching in schools, what we're training people for, in vocational programs? What does that look like?
Yeah, and I think some countries are certainly further ahead in terms of bringing AI into education far earlier. I think that's definitely an area where potentially New Zealand, and I know Australia, possibly a little bit behind as well.
Yeah.
So from
sorry, Gareth. Yeah, I was just that one in particular is a big question, in that AI as a crutch, and what that does to our the growth of certain parts of our brains. So it's like you could project forward, and we're obviously our key focus is on building software, but we can see certain practices that it's good to know how the AI is doing it, because so that you can direct it effectively. But if you've got graduates coming in who have never done it, then do they miss out on the opportunity to build that, cognitive muscle? I think, like you say, it's really hard to chart the course and know exactly where this ends up and how we best support that.
I think professions become, the level of abstraction sort of goes up, doesn't it? So you still need certain skills to be an expert, but you're not operating at such a low level to actually derive the same results.
Well, I think foundational skills are still going to be important, like
Mm-hmm.
you know, reading, writing, math. Like people have to learn how to do those things, right? Because those are just foundational things. But Daniel, what you mentioned kind of brought up for me the MIT study that we were all sharing around a couple of weeks ago. And I know that the study is early, it's not conclusive, it's like the very, very early days of the study. But what it shows at this point is that, and the study was specifically looking at when we outsource our writing, what happens to our brain function. And it was seeing a decline, right? Particularly in that critical thinking type work that our brain does, which to me is very scary, because that is, I don't know, I don't think that what we need as a species is to be less critical in our thinking.
No.
I think it needs to go the other way. But this is where education can be very, or education needs to be very forward thinking in how do we, and I think this needs to start way before university, how do we actually keep doing the things that help young brains develop and grow, while also thinking about how do we prepare them to go into a world with AI? Like that is just gonna, like, no child that's in school today is going to show up in the workplace and have the same experiences that the three of us had, right?
No.
And if anyone is interested in these topics, we towards the end of the episode with Dave King, we covered a couple of these concepts and things that he was doing with his son and stuff like that. So yeah, fascinating topic.
So yeah, it's probably a good time to we've covered quite a lot of ground, as we usually do, and maybe let's try and summarize and see where we land.
Yeah. So we started with the fact that people don't always behave the way we'd like them to, in terms of designing things in this sort of perfect way. And so your recommendation was approaching things in a brain-friendly way. You also highlighted that bias is not exclusively bad. There's a lot of context behind that statement. But it was more important to know how and why it happens. You said that the brain makes shortcuts, and is making quick decisions, and those quick decisions often serve us. But as we've evolved, also sometimes they don't serve us well. So yeah, any comments on that block before I move? I've got a few more blocks of.
I just want to add this one caveat. Like we've talked about this in this conversation in a very high level way. Like there is a lot more context to all the things that you just recapped.
Yeah, absolutely. And so these things can collectively lead us to errors of judgment. And so it can really, it matters how we ask questions and present ideas, because framing is everything, because the brain anchors. So yeah, that one in particular, I think is helpful both from a design point of view, but it's also helpful in terms of how we engage with the models. And then I think one of the biggest callouts here is about people's trust in technology. And, I think we're all witnessing examples of this, or at least those of us who may be working more closely with it. And then when you see someone who's in your immediate circle engage with AI and have that first devastating moment when they realize it's lying to them.
I really liked some of the practical recommendations you made as well. So the roles, I think, instructing your AI to act in a particular role, that's great, and it's really powerful. Not just from helping you to think outside of your role, maybe in an area that's not so strong, but confirming that you're not missing a strong critique. Very powerful. The idea of wild and crazy idea generation, I love as well. for design. Get out of your mental model so that you start to see things in a different way.
The models are the ultimate yes men, aren't they? So, and that can be good and bad. Like, yes as in, hey, that wild and crazy idea, let's keep going. Or yes, world domination is the right thing to do, Dr. Dani.
Or you're just having a bad day and you just need a little ego boost. Like ChatGPT is amazing for that.
Yeah, actually it really is, isn't it? Yeah, I think a lot of people are finding that. Yeah. And so maybe, I know you've got a very sort of strong transformation background, and this is obviously a big change for individuals and organizations. Is there any wisdom or any experience you could share with leaders in organizations, sort of thinking about incorporating AI in the way they work, whatever field that might be?
One thing we have to remember is, again, this goes back to bias. So I'll try to use the stuff that I mentioned earlier to bring this home. So our brains, one of the things it does, and one of the reasons that we have these shortcuts is our brains are always scanning for threats. And change to our brain is a threat. And again, this goes back to our evolutionary biology when we lived out on the savannah, because we lived here, we know the lions are there, but now you want me to move here, but now I can't figure out where the lions are. Like, so change is very threatening to our brain. And our brains also like predictability, and change takes all of that away. So one of the things, so when we're talking about something like bringing in new technology, and I know right now we're talking about AI, but we've all been around to know that there will be another thing that we're all going to be wild and crazy about. And so whatever technology that we're talking about, when we bring something new in, there is a threat response. There's always, it doesn't matter how amazing it is, how excited we are about it, there is a threat response. Our brains are always going to look for ways to go, is this thing going to kill me? Now, in the modern world, it's not physically, well, hopefully not physically.
Maybe not. Yeah, hopefully not.
Here, but it's going to kill me. But it's perceived as a threat. So one of the things that we could do is actually encourage people to play with AI. Like, this is something that's going to come into our organization. Go have a play with it. Have a think about how might we use this to make so bring people into it rather than going, this is what we're doing. Involve people in thinking about and engaging them and think about, how is your job going to be different in 5 years because AI is going to be the commonplace, right? So I think if you frame it that way, it becomes more of an experiment. It becomes more of a fun thing. It sparks curiosity rather than going, we're rolling out AI. And it helps people figure out, and I think the clever thing about doing it that way is that you'll also get some brilliant ideas about how we could actually be using it. So that's one idea. The other thing is encouraging people to bring those ideas forward and showing that actually we're doing these types of things. The other thing that leaders really need to do is also ensuring that human capabilities are valuable. Organizations have a history of looking at technology as like the savior. Technology is going to come in and fix all that ails us. And we're repeating that pattern with AI, but we're forgetting that, humans buy from humans. Everything that organizations produce, at least to this stage, are ultimately for other humans. So humans have to be part of the equation. And I think leaders need to have these conversations and remind their teams that their human capabilities are just as valuable, if not more.
And that includes having sort of safe space for people to raise their concerns as well. So, play with it, share some of the good ideas, but also if you have concerns, but you don't make space for that, then you're not going to be able to effectively mitigate those.
And I think that along those lines is when people have that threat response reaction, don't dismiss them or don't make them feel like something is wrong with them. Like that feeling needs to be, that response needs to be validated. Like that is a very common response. Like, so not being dismissive of those responses.
I love
And
that.
the other thing I have to say is something that we are not talking about is around what are the ethical implications? Where does using AI go badly?
Yeah, I think that's a whole big topic in itself. But I love that angle, Dani. I think, thinking about it from that from a behavioural science perspective and thinking of change as a threat. I haven't heard that that sort of angle before, but it makes a lot of sense. So fantastic. Thank you so much. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it as well. But great conversation and some really interesting ideas.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This has been awesome.
Dani, where can people find you?
So I'm on LinkedIn.
Oh, there we go.
Oh,
let me put
sorry,
that one up.
wrong order. I am on LinkedIn, so feel free to follow, connect. Always happy to chat with people. There's a Design Thinker Institute website, which actually just got a glow up. So
nice.
check it out.
And I always enjoy listening to the Design Thinker podcast. So if you enjoyed listening to Dani on this podcast, then go over to there and you've got many, many, many hours more of fascinating topics across a whole range. So yeah. There was an interesting, just before we wrap up, there was an interesting case study I saw just recently. I think it was Norges Bank. And I've got to cover it now because it's relevant to you, Dani. Okay. So that they have been on this sort of AI journey over the last sort of 12 months. And they rolled out the tools across their investment teams. But they pointed it back at themselves. So they provided the data and they said, look at all our decisions and see what you find. And what it pointed out was a whole bunch of their cognitive biases around their investment decisions. So I thought that was just a really interesting case study. And it's just like different ways of using the tools rather than just to give you all the answers.
That's nice, isn't it? Shining light on the problems and on ourselves as well. Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers. Thank you. Until next time.